Imagine a place where survival is no longer a challenge. Food is always available. Clean water never runs out. The temperature is perfect. And there are no predators, diseases, or natural dangers. It sounds like the ideal world. Now imagine placing 8 healthy mice inside that paradise, 4 males and 4 females, and simply watching what happens. Less than 5 years later, every single mouse was gone. None of them died from starvation, illness, or injury that a veterinarian could identify. Instead, the colony slowly collapsed from within. This was the famous Universe 25 experiment, one of the most unsettling social experiments ever conducted. The project began in 1968 when American behavioral scientist John B. Calhoun decided what he believed was the perfect environment for mice. Every detail was carefully planned. Comfortable nesting areas filled each corner, the temperature remained constant, the habitat was cleaned regularly, and food and water were available at all times. The mice selected for the experiment were among the healthiest animals from the National Institutes of Health breeding program. Calhoun wasn't simply studying mice. His real interest was much bigger. For years, he had been asking a single question. What happens to a society when every struggle for survival disappears? Universe 25 wasn't his first attempt to answer it. For nearly 20 years, he had created different enclosed worlds for rats and mice, inside forests, barns, and laboratories. In total, he had already completed 20.
The habitat was built inside a federal research laboratory in Maryland. It measured roughly 9 feet by 9 feet and contained several levels of nesting apartments connected by mesh pathways stretching from the floor to the ceiling. Calhoun referred to these stacked living spaces as walk-up apartments. Every nesting area had constant access to food dispensers that never became empty and water bottles that never ran dry. According to his calculations, the enclosure could comfortably support nearly 3,800 mice. But the colony would never reach that number. On the very first day, Calhoun introduced the original 8 mice into their new home and sealed the enclosure. For more than 100 days, very little changed. The mice explored their surroundings, learned the layout of the habitat, claimed nesting spots, and settled into daily routines. Then, the first babies were born. From that point onward, the population expanded at an astonishing pace. Roughly every 55 days, the number of mice doubled, making Universe 25 appear to be a complete success. At least, that's what everyone believed in the beginning. No one realized that the first signs of collapse had already started to grow beneath the surface. The beginning of the collapse. As the days passed, the colony continued to grow at an incredible pace. By day 315, more than 600 mice were living inside Universe 25. The once spacious paradise was becoming crowded. Mice climbed over one another on the narrow ramps, slept in large groups, and competed for the most desirable nesting spots near the upper apartments. This was the turning point. In the wild, when a mouse population becomes too large for its territory, younger mice naturally leave to establish colonies elsewhere. That migration reduces competition and keeps the social structure balanced. Inside Universe 25, however, there was nowhere to go. The enclosure was completely sealed. No matter how crowded it became, every mouse was forced to remain inside. As a result, many young males found themselves without territory, status, or any meaningful role within the colony. Gradually, these males gathered in the center of the enclosure. John Calhoun spent countless hours observing them. Instead of competing, exploring, or building territories, they simply wandered aimlessly or rested together in large, inactive groups. Although they were physically healthy and had plenty to eat, they appeared to have lost all motivation. Even more surprising was their response to aggression. When another mouse attacked them, many refused to defend themselves. They absorbed the blows, quietly walked away, and returned to doing nothing. At the same time, Another group of males developed the exact opposite behavior. Rather than becoming passive, these mice turned unusually aggressive and restless. They rushed through the enclosure, invaded territories claimed by others, and ignored the normal courtship rituals that had always been part of mouse society. Even dominant males often failed to stop them. As this behavior spread, the colony became increasingly chaotic, displaying social patterns that had rarely, if ever, been observed in healthy mouse populations. The females also began to change. Those unable to secure a stable position within the social hierarchy gradually withdrew from the rest of the colony. Many isolated themselves in the highest nesting areas, avoiding contact with other mice altogether. Over time, they stopped reproducing. Calhoun noticed another strange phenomenon that he later called the behavioral sink. Although food was available throughout the enclosure, the mice crowded around only a few feeding stations, while many others remained almost completely unused. It seemed that eating alone had become unnatural to them, even when plenty of food was available elsewhere. As the crowding intensified, the colony moved one step closer to total social collapse. And soon, the greatest tragedy of the experiment would begin, not among the males, but among the mothers raising the next generation. When mothers stopped being mothers. As overcrowding continued to worsen, raising young became increasingly difficult. In a healthy mouse colony, dominant males normally protect their territories and help keep nests safe from intruders. But inside Universe 25, the constant pressure of defending overcrowded spaces slowly exhausted them. Many males eventually gave up protecting their own nests altogether. That left the mothers to defend both themselves and their babies alone. The burden became overwhelming. Instead of carefully raising their litters, many females began showing behaviors that shocked even experienced researchers. Some abandoned their newborn pups in random locations throughout the enclosure. Others seemed unable to recognize which babies were actually theirs. In the most disturbing cases, mothers attacked and even ate their own offspring. As these behaviors spread, infant survival collapsed. In certain parts of the colony, fewer than 1 out of every 20 newborn mice survived long enough to be weaned. Looking back on the experiment, John Calhoun wrote that by this stage, the colony was still physically alive, but its social structure had already died. The adults remained alive, yet the system that allowed them to function as a community had completely broken down. The few young mice that managed to survive faced another problem. They grew up in an environment where they had never witnessed healthy social behavior. They had no proper examples of parenting, cooperation, territory, or normal relationships. As they matured, they behaved unlike any generation Calhoun had ever observed. The males of this new generation rarely fought. They showed almost no interest in mating. They avoided social interaction whenever possible. Instead, their lives followed a simple routine. They ate, they slept, and they spent an extraordinary amount of time grooming themselves. Because they almost never fought, their fur remained spotless and perfectly clean. They appeared healthier and more beautiful than any other mice in the colony. Calhoun eventually gave them a name, the Beautiful Ones. From the outside, they looked like the perfect mice. But beneath that perfect appearance, something essential had disappeared. They no longer competed, formed relationships, or reproduced. In many ways, they were alive only in body. Their role in the future of the colony had already come to an end. The experiment had entered a stage from which there would be no recovery.